Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for attending our first community meeting for the Dusable Park. My name is Ramona Westbrook, and as Susan has mentioned, I am joined this evening by Carol Ross Barney, and together we lead the architectural firms that comprise the Dusable Park Design Alliance, better known as DPDA. You can go to the next slide. Our team, the Dusable Park, or DPDA, was selected by the Chicago Park District to design Dusable Park, which is a 3.4-acre site at the confluence or the connection of Lake Michigan and the Chicago River. As you see on this slide, it is actually at the entrance into the city via the Chicago River. I think you can go to the next slide. I don't have it in front of me. So I'd just like to review with you our agenda for the evening. We will begin with the welcome and the introductions, which is where we are now. And then we will have a quick video that will be presented by Peggy Montez, one of the original members of the Dusable Park Alliance. We will review the meeting goals, and then we will review the community engagement approach. We'll spend about 15 minutes discussing the project timeline and the framework, and then we will have our breakout sessions, which will comprise the majority of the meeting. The purpose of this evening's meeting is to hear from you. So these listening sessions are very important, and we're very enthusiastic and eager to hear what you have to say and receive your counsel regarding the design of the park. After the breakout sessions, we will set aside 20 minutes for report outs to hear what people said during the sessions. And then we will have a 12-minute question and answer period for any questions that were put in the chat. And then we'll conclude with our next steps. You can go to the next slide. Our team is comprised of not only architects and landscape architects and engineers, but we've also put together a team that includes a historian, artist, and community engagement specialist. Together, the intent is that our very diverse and far-reaching team will create a comprehensive design that will uplift the story of our city's founder and his values, that help set the foundation of the city and then also celebrate the unique terrain of this location. You can go to the next slide. We have also engaged a steering committee to help us steer the project. Our steering committee consists of over 30 organizations, all of whom have a unique interest in Dusable and the native habitat of this area. Next slide. So at this time, I'd like to encourage you to listen to Peggy Montez. She will be presenting a video about the history and how we've gotten here for the Dusable Park.
Hello, I am Peggy Montez, and I am the only living original member of the Dusable Park project. For over 130 years, there has been an ongoing effort to honor and recognize Jean-Baptiste Point Dusable as the first permanent non-Native American settler and founder of modern Chicago. This mission first started over 130 years ago in 1893 at the International World's Fair. A group of dedicated Black citizens and an amazing group of Black women, which included Ida B. Wells and Frederick Douglass, were determined to have a presence at this fair to tell about the important contribution Dusable made in Chicago's history. Dusable's recognition in the history of Chicago took on new significance in the 20th century as Chicago became a center of Black culture, arts, and business. Black Chicagoans could look back with pride at the role Dusable played in Chicago's development. In 1928, two educators, Ann Oliver and Alice Neal, formed the Jean-Baptiste Point Dusable Memorial Society that later became known as Jean-Baptiste Point Dusable League, to continue the mission of honoring and acknowledging Dusable. At the 1933 Chicago World's Fair, they were instrumental in championing Dusable's historic contributions by having a replica of his cabinet and informational pamphlets about Dusable Chicago's first citizen. Their committee was also instrumental in getting Dusable High School named in 1935, getting the bridge on Michigan Avenue and the Chicago River named after Dusable in 1970, and the National Historic Landmark plaque in Pioneer Court in 1976. They began the annual wreath laying ceremony in the 1950s, which continues today. With the historic election of Harold Washington, the first black mayor of Chicago, there began an ever-increasing push to recognize and honor Dusable. Mayor Harold Washington pulled together a team to find a place to properly honor Dusable. Mayor Washington asked Dr. Margaret T. Burroughs, Chicago historian and co-founder of the Dusable Museum of African American History, myself, Peggy Montez, a trustee of the Dusable Museum, commissioner of the Chicago Women's Committee, and Raymond Price, chief curator of the Dusable Museum. We met together to come up with possible solutions to achieving our ongoing mission of honoring Dusable. We identified an undeveloped 3.5-acre of site situated at the confluence of Chicago River, Ogden Slip, and Lake Michigan, in close proximity to Navy Pier. Soon after, Mayor Washington and the City Council had it transferred to the Chicago Park District. In 1987, Mayor Harold Washington dedicated this site as Dusable Park. His vision was to create Chicago's park, a park that was open and accessible to all Chicagoans. Dusable Park is to serve as a destination for the local community, citywide residents, and tourists. Harold always said that Chicago is one city. We shall work as one people for our common good and common goals. Over the course of the past 35 years, what he envisioned for all of Chicago's citizens and international visitors has not yet to come to fruition. The Dusable Steering Park Committee came together in 1998 to make certain that Dusable Park becomes a reality. However, there have been many setbacks along the way. Number one, Dusable Park site was contaminated, but with local, state, and federal support, the site has been cleared of its thorium contamination. Number two, the outer walls of the site had to be rebuilt, which was recently completed. Number three, and the park's $10 million funding was linked to the development of a project to be developed on the west side of Lakeshore Drive, known as the Spire, which was canceled. Dusable Park is still linked to this site, which is to be developed by Related Midwest. I am pleased that we are moving in the right direction. $5 million given by the City of Chicago to the Park District has allowed them to contract with the Dusable Park Alliance to move forward a design for Dusable Park based on the recommendations of the 2006 framework. That is why we are all here, to give to Chicago and the world the promise of Dusable Park, the historic legacy of Mayor Harold Washington that is years overdue. Over the past 5 years, Chicago has changed, but Mayor Harold Washington's vision of an accessible, inclusive park for all of Chicago is still the park that can be achieved by you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Peggy. And I'd just like to also take a moment to thank you for all of your hard work and for your perseverance, staying the course with us and bringing us here today. Thank you again. Now, if you can go to the next slide, we can discuss our meeting goals. Yes, so we are here today to seek your counsel. We're here actually to hear from you, but we're especially seeking your counsel regarding the plans for the park. And we're very interested in hearing your feedback regarding the community engagement approach and the project framework. You can go to the next slide. So with regard to the I was going to introduce you, Julia, but come on in.
Go ahead, Ramona. I apologize.
No. Julia Perkins is our community engagement specialist, and she's going to review the community engagement approach with you.
Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. I mean, this is a really important meeting for the Dusable Park Design Alliance. In terms of the community engagement, we have 3 key meetings. This is one of them, the listening session that you're all participating in today. It's so critical that we get your feedback and counsel, your thoughts and your perspectives in terms of your expectation of the park. The next community meeting will be in person. That will be an ideation session. And essentially the ideation session means that the design team will present out its working concepts that it's garnered from all of the feedback that it has received from the listening session. It will share out those concepts and also work to listen to get your feedback on those concepts. The next meeting is scheduled in May, on May 23rd, and that's when the community will see the final concept for the Dusable Park. And again, it is a time to get your feedback. In addition, we have a survey on Chicago Park District's website that I really encourage everyone to complete, and I'll put the link in the chat. That survey, again, enables us to garner more information from the broader Chicago community in terms of its expectations, its desires for Dusable Park. We are so thrilled to, again, have you with us. We know that it is an aggressive timeline, and we know that you are here because you want to give voice and insights and counsel to the process, and that is very much appreciated. And we will hear from you more individually when we go to our breakout sessions. Again, thank you so very much. And one last thing I would like to share, if you have comments or questions, if you could put them in the chat, because after the breakout sessions, we will have a representative from the Chicago Park District answering as many questions as we can. Thank you again. I'll turn it back to you, Ramona.
Thank you, Julia. So next, we're going to briefly discuss the project timeline for the project, and you'll see that the project timeline aligns very closely to the community engagement approach. We have our pre-design, which is the work that we'll be doing prior to actually designing, which is this listening session or these listening meetings where we will hear from you and learn more about what you would like to see and your counsel regarding the park. The next phase of work for us is the schematic design, and aligned with that is the ideation meeting. At that time, we will have taken what we've heard from you and created some ideas and share those back with you and hear your comments with regard to those ideas. Our next phase of work is the design development. After we receive the feedback from you during the ideation, we will take that information and finalize our design concept and present that out during the community meeting in May. At that time, we will receive more feedback, but we will have one concept at that moment, and it will be pretty detailed in our direction. From there, we will go on with the production of our construction documents. We'll take those to 50%. And after those are reviewed and approved, we will move forward with the project. You can go to the next slide. I'd also like to discuss briefly with you the framework plan. As Peggy mentioned in her video, the framework plan was actually created in 2006. And that framework plan was very instrumental in developing the direction that we're moving forward with for this project. The goals for that plan were very direct. We were to celebrate and honor Jean-Baptiste Point Dusable. We were to recognize the confluence of the river and the lake, the unique terrain at this location. We were to attract local community, citywide residents and tourists from abroad. and also create a park that is evolved from the input from the Park District and the steering committee, and integrate the sculpture by Martin Puryear into the park design. You can go to the next slide. The framework plan also has a wetland and a boardwalk and an outdoor classroom with an adventure path, all of which were intended to celebrate the native habitat that was around during DuSable's area. It's an aspirational plan. It's not fixed in stone, but it's what we're using as our foundation to build upon and develop more ideas in line with these thoughts. It will also have an observatory that showcases the natural trees or the native trees and serve as a resting spot for migratory birds along Lake Michigan's flyway. There's also a plan for several plazas and a historic wall. Again, it's aspirational in nature. It's got quite a few great ideas, and our intent is to build upon that and to explore them even more. If you go to the next slide, you'll see that there's some renderings that allude to what the spaces could look like. The Founders Plaza, the Ogden Slip Plaza, History Wall, a boardwalk along the lakefront, and an outdoor classroom, all of which are meant to celebrate not only his history, not only DuSable's history, but also the history of the terrain. I think you can go to the next slide. Yes, and then we should also note that the site has had quite a bit of work done on it. As Peggy mentioned in her video, the site was actually contaminated. And so a lot of work had to go into cleaning up the contamination on the site. And fortunately, that work has been completed. In 2001, the hotspots were actually identified. And since then, the money has been raised to actually remove that material. It has been removed. And the phase 2 remediation work was completed in 2020. And so the planning process has begun, and that is why we are all here today to begin that or kick off that portion of the work with the community. So now that we've completed just the introduction and the basic discussions around the history of the project and what has brought us here today, we would like to get together now and move into our breakout rooms. We will not have a break. So if you need to leave or at least step away from your computer, it's okay, we will continue. But now we're going to move into our breakouts. I'm glad everyone has returned. Hopefully you enjoyed your breakout session and you had an opportunity to share in a robust discussion about the expectations for Dusable Park and anything that we, the Dusable Park Design Alliance, needs to understand or be aware of, or any concerns that you might have with regard to the park. So now we're going to, I'm pretty sure next on our agenda is actually reporting what we heard in the breakout sessions. So I think we had, how many facilitators?
We
Susan?
had 8 breakouts. Okay. And so I'll start. I'm breakout number 6. We had a really wonderful kind of composition of critical thinkers in our group. And where there seemed to be alignment around is that the park needs to be a passive space, a place that is calming and retreat-like. So when you're in the physical location, or if you're in one of the nearby high rises, you could look down and it would be a calming place. It was also thought it would be great to have some type of walking promenade as part of the design. We had several walkers in our group. They were also in agreement that a flyover or some type of connection, whether it's to the Riverwalk or to the above, should be put in place. to provide access. There was agreement that it shouldn't be a place that has kind of a loading area, you know, such as having a water taxi stops. The issue of, I think, parking also came up, especially for ADA. Does anyone from my group want to add anything more to what was shared? Did I miss anything?
I can't.
Okay, going once, going twice.
Julia,
All right.
they can't actually come off mute unless we permit them. So.
Oh, okay. I think that I captured everything. Thank you so much. So I'll pass it back to another group, maybe group 1.
I had group 1.
Wonderful.
Hello. So we had a lot of people on the same wavelength, same thoughts. So we talked about the importance of accessibility. We actually had some bikers in my group and some bicyclists. And so, yeah, just talked about the importance of accessibility and really wanting to make sure that people can access the site. And we talked about wanting a contemplative space. So similar to, I think, what Julia was sharing about. We wanted the park to be a place that's used, but not overused. And so something that's not too crowded, but you can really go there and enjoy and relax. And so, perhaps thinking about bicyclists, like maybe we have like a bike rack towards the entrance and kind of encourage folks to, you know, kind of slow down when you get to this space. Also talked about artwork and perhaps even plaques that happen along a walkway or the promenade, really wanting to see opportunities to learn about Dusable and his story and his history. And so having that kind of pop up throughout the site. And then we also talked about maintenance and really whatever gets put here, really wanting to make sure that it's maintained. We actually talked about dogs and thinking about, you know, how do we navigate that? How do we make sure that, you know, people clean up after themselves but still wanting everyone to be welcomed. And yeah, I think that's what our group talked about.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's go on to group 2.
Hey, hi. So I had group 2, Eric Martin. And so probably the key things, and some of them are kind of common themes that I've heard from the other groups. One was accessibility in terms of like being able to access the park from many different ways, either from Ogden Slip or from the flyover. So that's one of the concerns from our group. The other one was telling the Dusable story and being able to do that in a compelling way via artwork or some sort of permanent display. The other item that was really prevalent in our group was about creating a safe environment or a safe place for people to come to the park. Safety is a major concern for our design. And then lastly, the key thing was getting this done, getting the project done. It's been a long time coming, and our group felt like, you know, they would like to see the completion of this park. So those are like the key points that came up in our group.
Wonderful. Thank you, Eric. Group number 3. That may have been.
Sorry, that was me.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Kelly.
Yes, thank you.
And just so you know, I don't remember my group number, so I'll just go last.
So I think we had some similar discussions. There were concerns about access. I lost my video, sorry. And access to the park, that maybe there was only one access point, and fire and safety reasons around that. There were some concerns about restrooms and if there were not going to be permanent restrooms, at least porta potties or some sort, and thinking about how that might be designed into But then there were also concerns about smell coming from that. So, and then noise was a big concern. We heard from a number of people and how that relates to our restrictions on the park and the number of people that will be visiting, and if there's music or entertainment, what hours of the day that would be occurring. And then as far as suggestions, we had some suggestions about bringing in local artists, making this more of an educational park and with the historical plaques or something like that. And then there's also a suggestion for a COVID memorial along the walk, or some thoughts about that, and maybe doing a fundraiser, brick selling or something like that, to bring in just another element to the park. And then one other suggestion was about maybe like an interactive group invited graffiti space, so that you kind of focus that and maybe keep out unwanted graffiti in a way.
Interesting.
So like a chalkboard wall or something like that.
That sounds awesome. Okay. Anything else?
I think I got everything.
That's awesome. Thanks so much. Okay. Group number 4.
Hi. Hi, I'm Miss Aino at DPDA, and thank you again for everybody who was in my room. So let me run down the top line key points that I learned from everyone. Yes, a desire to be peaceful, a desire to have this Dusable Park a peaceful and quiet place. Make sure that it does not become an athletic field. And yes, and the bathroom and access topics came up in our session as well. And there was a highly strong recommendation for, and I would say this loudly, get everything you want built at the initial construction, because if you don't, you may not get it done at the next round. So thank you. I won't say who it was who offered this comment, but thank you very much. And not just to make this park come true, but after getting it built, it's important to provide maintenance to keep the park safe and usable and clean for everyone to use. Also, seating is important. There should be lots of benches, not just for seniors and people with challenges, but also small children who might go out there and use the place for a long time. Let's think about a way to shield noise from the Dusable Lakeshore Drive. Maybe tall trees, maybe a wall of tall trees against the drive. Yes, bathroom came up a few times, and there are a couple of locations that are existing nearby. For example, one to the south at the Dusable Harbor. It is not currently open to everyone, to the general public, but maybe it could reopen for everyone. That's a possibility to consider. The next location for the bathroom access, the Navy Pier to the north, but that's a little farther out. Access issue, yes. Should there be an access from the slip or from the river? Should there be a water access? This needs to be a continuing conversation. Flyover into the park, yes. 2006 plan did not have a flyover in place, so this is a new item that we need to coordinate with and consider. Tall monument to honor Dusable. This monument may be a sculpture. It could be a sculpture by Martin Puryear. However, in the past, when the artist presented some working models and ideas, they all seem to be an abstract and art in the style of abstract art, and not sure if that would be an appropriate for this to commemorate Dusable, or should it be a non-figurative sculpture instead of abstract? That debate will continue. For any monument to be there, lighting is needed. So we need to think about the lighting and education, Wi-Fi access, consider Wi-Fi access. maybe video installation. 2006, at the time, Wi-Fi existed, but not the prominent item that it is now. So consider that. Any monument or sculpture that will be built has to be a marriage between art and history. There may be more than one way to celebrate.
Okay,
Wonderful.
You. Thank you, Misa. We haven't heard from Marcus and Sarah.
Yeah, so I was group 5.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah, so my group had a very engaging conversation. We also highlighted a lot of the key points that were discussed in the other groups. So I'll keep my recap very brief. But our key takeaways were we want the park to be as natural as possible with little to no commercial areas. There should be areas of shading structures in places to reflect and view this wonderful city that we are in for the citizens and the people who live here, but people who are visiting. And that this could maybe be done by creating mounds or creating like a serpentine path that brings you up at different topography levels, so that there will be an accessible point to it. We also want to make sure that the history of Dusable is told, and making sure that this park is accessible to all people. And we also want to make sure that it is maintained and especially regulated after park hours with big discussion points.
Wonderful, thank you. And Sarah?
Okay, I was group 7.
Okay.
And they echoed many of the sentiments that were already spoken about today. So one of the things that was brought up was making sure that this park represents the first family of Chicago. So I thought that was a nice way of putting it. And also making sure that this park is for Chicagoans first versus a touristy stop. And not trying to duplicate any of the nearby parks, such as Northerly Island or even Navy Pier. There's a performance park that's right, I believe, south of that. So making sure we're not duplicating anything that exists there. And then shading, because we get the sun, it's a sunny spot during the morning. So making sure that we provide shade.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you so much. And then I'll just report out on my group. And like some of the other groups, we talked about very similar things. There's a desire, of course, for a very reflective space, but having a circular path that takes you around the park that kind of is an extension of the Riverwalk that would be complete with benches, that's very welcoming, maybe even a cafe that might even have the theme or look of the Dusable Log Cabin. That was one idea. Another one was to make it a year-round park, somehow have some kind of shelter or something that could be pulled back, but somehow make the park accessible year-round. As we know, our winters are interesting, but also make it state-of-the-art, leaning into technology, maybe using QR codes or holograms to engage our younger generation, but also wanting to celebrate the environmental aspects of the site and education and the history of the site, celebrating not only Dusable, but also the indigenous people that were there, and even some of the history that's surrounding or that is affiliated with the Ogden Slip and its construction to access the Tribune Tower. And then there was also an idea about providing shade on hot days, maybe something like a mist or the ability to mist the area so that you would be cooler on those very hot days. And then we had a pretty robust discussion around boat traffic, something that I had really thought about, that there is a significant amount of boat traffic, and being mindful of that and careful in the design to address how the site will feel due to the boat traffic. So all of that's great, wonderful, wonderful information, very robust, very interesting, and quite a bit of it. So I'm really looking forward to wrapping our heads around this and incorporating as much as we can into the design of the park. I think now we may have just a few minutes left for Q&A. There were some questions that came up in the chat. Sarah, if you're available, do you mind addressing some of those questions for a few minutes?
Yep, absolutely, no problem. So since we've got a couple of minutes left, I will read some of the questions and comments that have come up in the chat. And then once I'm done running through those, we will offer the opportunity for spoken comments or questions if you have some. So let me get through those. There's a couple in the chat, and then we'll take some time for spoken questions. So if you have one, please raise your hand using the raise your hand feature, and we will call on you and ask you to unmute when it's your time to speak. So I am going to start up at the top. I can't say for breakouts, but would love to see a space that offers a quiet, green, air pollution-free, walkable park that has a safe connecting walkway similar to Maggie Daly Park that is well lit and car-free. That's from Winnie T. So thank you for that, Winnie. And let's see. Someone mentioned, this is from AB. Someone mentioned including a COVID memorial. Great idea. And since Northwestern Memorial Hospital is so close, it would be nice to honor the nurses, doctors, and other health professionals who treat COVID patients by including something specific to them, not just to those who had COVID. A plaque, rotunda, fountain, benches, etc. Make it some place where hospital employees can walk over to during lunch hours or when they need a break. So thank you for that contribution. From Pat, what if there isn't enough money to get everything done? Funding for the project is contingent upon Related Midwest completing their Streeterville high-rise construction. They've pledged $10 million. But if, like their predecessor, Related Midwest doesn't complete their project, we only have $5 million. So yes, this accurately reflects where we are. And I think we discussed this briefly earlier, and we discussed it in our discussion group, but we've got two pots of money right now for this project. We've got $5 million from the city that we have in hand. We're using that to pay for our design team, and a portion of it to start construction of the park. And Related Midwest is committed to donating $10 million towards the park. This commitment is outlined in the PD statement if anyone is interested in looking at the detail of the schedule for funding and so forth. But basically, and just kind of simplified, once Related pulls foundation permits, they're required to transfer $1.5 million to the park district, which will be placed in an escrow account and used for construction of the park. They will provide the balance of the money when the park is ready for construction. So our design timeline really does start ticking when the foundation permits are pulled from Related, which we understand will happen in the next few months. We will have then 16 months to finish bid documents for the park. The PD also provides a provision where Related has agreed to potentially construct the park for us, which may be an efficient way to move forward. So we're hoping we can take advantage of that. And in that case, Related would deposit the balance of the $8.5 million into the escrow account, and we would draw down that funding to build the park. There is, of course, the worst case scenario where the development does not move forward. We don't have a plan B for that right now, but we do meet with Related every other week. They are confident that they're moving forward. We're working with them on agreements right now. And so all signs are that we are going to have a successful project and get this thing done this time around.
Okay, there are a couple more comments.
All right, I am scrolling down. Karen Wells, this is Dusable Park. Let's not make it about other things. There should be a separate COVID memorial. Thanks, Karen. Pat, is there or should there be a plan to raise funds from Chicago corporations comparable with Millennium Park? That's something we can certainly consider. Yes. Shannon, I agree with Karen Wells. There are so many great ideas that have to do with the history related to Dusable, his family and times, and the native people who lived on this land before. Anastasi says, Mayor Harold Washington in 1987 announced the project, but not much is known about Dr. Antonio Sanat, MD, pardon me if I pronounce that incorrectly, who was his personal physician and was a naturalized immigrant from Haiti. He can be considered the modern day Jean-Baptiste Pointe Dusable for many, but for the medical community. So thank you. That's a good piece of history that we can take into consideration. From John Lowe, I agree the park is an opportunity to celebrate Haitian Potawatomi intersections, and similar intersections are the story of Chicago. Don't erase Kittihawa nor the Potawatomi, who were custodians of this land for thousands of years. Chicago existed before Mr. Dusable. In fact, Chicago is a Potawatomi world.
Word.
Word. Yes, thank you. Sorry.
It's late. I understand.
Yes, great point. Okay, so I don't see any more questions in the chat right now. I would like to open the floor to anyone who'd like to offer a spoken comment to the full group. And if someone can help me scan for hands, I'm kind of constricted here and I can't see the whole gallery.
I don't see anyone raising hands just at the moment. Let's see.
Then I will ask one question. Because this came up during our breakout room. There were at least a few participants who joined us today who are not able to view the slides earlier. So is it correct that the main room slide presentation and discussion will be posted to the Chicago Park District website?
Yes, thank you so much. London, can you please post a link in the chat? We will post a recording of this full meeting, so that will be, we're organizing it like that. It will be a recording of the front end presentation and a recording of the report out, the group report outs, and this Q&A. We'll post that recording to our project website, and we will also post a copy of the slide deck to the website. So you guys can look for that within the next week or so. Our team will send out a correspondence if you signed up in the Zoom with your email to let you know that it's up and available. And we hope you have a chance to take a look, and we hope you have a chance to share it with anyone who may not have been able to join us.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Sarah. So we are at the conclusion of our meeting. The next step would be for you guys to please save the date and promote the community meetings. We will have another meeting. This actually concludes our listening session meetings, but our next meeting will be ideation meeting. So we're going to take all of the information that we have received from both the steering committee meetings and this meeting and start to incorporate that in our designs. We're pretty excited. We're ready to get started putting pen to paper and coming up with some great ideas. Our next meeting is in February. And then following that, we have our final community meeting where we will actually be presenting out our final design solutions or solution. And that one is in May, on Wednesday, May 3rd. So please save those dates and promote it to your communities. Thanks so much, you all. I really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule and sharing your ideas with us. Have a good evening.
Thank you, everyone.